I'll tell a very brief story about working at this company, and I was covering very early in my career. There were four Korean singers, myself included, on cover cast. So the main director showed up, and he's like, "Okay, we're kind of blocking whatever. This is like 20 years ago, whatever." And he kind of stopped and he looked around. He's like, "All the Asians go stand at the back of the room. I'll stand in the middle of you. We'll take a picture, and I'll say I had a huge career in Asia."
Fuck me.
And we all just kind of looked at each other like, and he thought that was like the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
We all the rest of the singers just kind of looked at each other, knowing that we could never say anything about that.
Yeah.
But today, the amazing thing is, hopefully that would never happen, A, but B, we have the courage now to say, dude, that, at least to each other, like that was really messed up.
Yeah. Adam
That was
Diegel in space. Well, dude, you know what? The reason I want to have you on is I've got this series with Wear Yellow Proudly about the challenges and the issues that the Asian community faces in our
yeah,
industry.
yeah.
And I stumbled across your post the other day, and it really, I was like, I'd like to talk to Adam about that. So could you maybe just restate, or maybe just give me sort of the thrust of what you were talking about then, and
Definitely would love to.
yeah,
So when I started singing, um, and I guess everybody does this to a certain degree, they look to see what is being celebrated, what is the standard, what is the level that I need to get to achieve, um, not even success really, but just to have a standard of what's good, what's bad.
right,
And inevitably, in no matter what rep that I found myself looking at, Italian, German, French, it was always um, a white European um, example of good,
right,
which I didn't I didn't really think anything about it, um, until someone really asked me my heritage, my background, and I thought, wow, well, I don't see any other Asians being celebrated or lifted up. So maybe I should just not tell them, or tell them a version of the truth, because I am half
right.
Korean. Right? My father's second generation American German, and my mother is full Korean from Korea. And so I just focused on that second generation German aspect of me.
Yeah.
And most people look at me and they're like, well, you're not 100% Caucasian. And I'm like, yeah, but the truth that I moved to the US when I was 2 years old. So I really consider myself mostly American,
Yeah.
but you can't really hide.
Yeah.
And because of this whole amazing time that we're living in, uh, Black Lives Matter, and then Black Opera Alliance, and just showing a focus on, or highlighting that there is a lack of diversity, when you know I mean, the world is getting smaller and smaller every single day, and you go to any major metropolitan area and then you could just see so many different colors and shapes and different people and cultures. And it was such a shame looking back on it, when I first started, that wasn't celebrated, um, I guess, as it should be.
I did note, like in my other conversations with folks in this subject, one of the things that did come up was the lack of sort of role models and mentors, that someone that you could whose experience that you could find commonality with, and then help you navigate through it, because of the fact that so many of the casting choices, you were either pigeonholed into an Asian role, or you were there's with some of my guests, they were just sort of forced into character rep because that was what people were comfortable with.
Yeah.
And the idea that like one of my friends that would the idea that he would be cast, even though he has the voice for it, the idea that he would be cast in a lead was, and he's probably, a little bit older than us, but it was so, people just thought it was crazy. The idea that it would be, they said,
Yeah.
just stick to your Goros and all that stuff and you'll have a great career.
Yeah.
But he sort of, it was really frustrating for him not to be able to say, well, there's this guy. What about him? It just wasn't. I mean, there are examples, but it wasn't as ubiquitous as, say, someone like me could look at like Cheryl Mills and George
Right.
London and guys like that I could sort of relate to. And
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. The Olympics are going on right now, and Simone Biles just didn't participate because of a lot of the pressures that she's feeling. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the examples that we had, or the lack thereof, um, I think it's so important for everyone in whatever profession to have someone that they could aspire to. Um, and I know it gets into kind of a weird area when we're talking about aesthetics
yeah,
in opera, but unfortunately, that's where we're at today. Um, and it's like what you just said. I mean, the lack of representation is kind of alarming. Um, but
you have
yet,
colleagues in other disciplines in classical music that you feel like it seems to be a product of the storytelling nature of our particular community in
yeah,
classical music. Whereas, pianists and violinists and orchestral musicians seem to have a lot more acceptance
yep.
than, say, people that tell stories.
But I'll be really honest with you, Mike. It's really unfortunate that in today's opera business we have so much emphasis on aesthetic,
Yeah,
on what someone looks like rather than what someone sounds like.
yeah,
And it's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever experienced in my life. And it's hilarious because as singers, we go out and we have our friends come to the show, and our friends who know singing, or maybe not even, they don't know anything about singing, they don't know anything about music, and they're like, yeah, I really like that person's voice, and I didn't like that person's voice. And you're like, yeah,
there
that's
you
right.
go. It's that simple.
It's that simple. And then it's unbelievably frustrating to, as a singer in this business, we love and care about this business so much, and we want this business to be so great and succeed at every level. And then you hear and you experience the reaction of someone going, yeah, that person wasn't very good. I mean, they were pretty, but they didn't sound very good. And it's like, he's a banker, you know.
Yeah, right.
And then in our conversation, it's like, I've heard so many friends, Asian friends, say they've had the experience where an administrator would flatly tell them it just doesn't look good if a black singer falls in love with an Asian singer. And you're just like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah.
Like, what about opera makes sense? You look at it, Rodolfo and Mimi look at each other. 2 seconds later, they fall in love. Like, it's
Oh, it's
all
because
this
it's so
suspension of disbelief.
bohemian, it's for love.
Exactly. Exactly. It's all this suspension of disbelief. And it's such a shame that we even have to have this conversation
Yeah.
about this, but here we are.
Well, the sort of status of in the context of whiteness in our business, the status of a preferred minority,
Right.
and wanting to not make waves and not
Right.
challenge these kind of things because there's a certain amount of, well, we're, they don't they're not as terrible to us as some other things, so we don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
And coming from a culture, at least in their specific cases, where even their parents and grandparents, it was much more. They were encouraged to just go along to get along. Don't make any waves. Don't cause any problems because it's just it'll only end badly for you.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I live in Florida, and Florida has even there still is a frustratingly there's a big percentage of racist activity down there. And
In Florida? What?
shut your mouth, shut your mouth. So, I was playing golf with these two black gentlemen, and they were older, and this was after um, the horrific events of George Floyd and all this amazing activism and awareness that has come from that unfortunate event. And I was like, gentlemen, like your age, growing up in Florida, I can only imagine the amount of racism that you guys faced. And they looked at each other as if this was the most shocking event like ever. Like someone was actually asking them about their experiences of racism in America. And I'm like, dude, it's 2021.
Yeah.
Like this is happening. And to your point, they, I could tell that they could not tell me the levels of horrible situations that they faced
Yeah.
for the broader scope, right? But also for how they process it, how they have dealt with it, how they are dealing with it, how they'll deal with it in the future, how they're probably dealing with it to their grandkids or kids.
Yeah.
And in our business, I mean, you're only as good as your last performance.
Yeah.
You say yes, you show up on time, you suck it up and you do it if you want to get hired again.
Yeah.
And to ever raise the question that there is overtly racist activity, decisions being made in this business, to be the face of someone to initiate that or insinuate that, that's a career killer. Just go be an accountant, like the
I'm
day
an
after you
accountant.
do.
I mean, do you think it's a function of sort of do you think it has a generational function to it? Because I do know that like younger people, like people in their 20s, this new generation, they're especially people our generation, we were trained to just sort of take whatever kind of abuse and terrible situations you encounter, part of the requirement is to be resilient in the face of those things and try to work around it. And I noticed a lot of the younger generation, they just are not going to put up with it. And I mean, I applaud them, their bravery, because they are the most marginalized by age demographic in our business, because there's the demand curve is not on their side.
Right.
And so, do you see that in your younger colleagues, this a willingness and an eagerness and a hunger to create the kind of change that we need in this industry to make it more representative and less pigeonholy?
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the younger generation, in my opinion, is the most amazing, introspective, just aware to their benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for them to bring out these issues and to be the one to say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Don't joke like that. Don't say those things.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I know that it's great because they're supporting each other in that. And you're absolutely right. Our generation, we did just have to tolerate it.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic for me to see those younger voices step up. They're so smart. They're so intelligent. They embrace analyzing themselves. They embrace analyzing standards and breaking down barriers. And it's such a great time to be alive right now.
Yeah. Do you feel like when when companies start to address these issues, that they tend, rather than to take a more comprehensive approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, they sometimes they tend to go on what's trendy at the moment, what group is at the fore, and we'll focus on that for the next 4 weeks, which means we'll, if whatever casting we're doing will be in a year and a half or so, and
Right.
then they move on to the next hot topic and the next hot topic, rather than taking a more comprehensive approach.
Absolutely. And it's kind of a um, endemic problem with casting right now.
Yeah,
So yes to everything you just said, and for this to have traction and for it to be sustainable, um, it just looks good for everybody. It just works well for everybody. If this is not a flash in the pan kind of thing, but to that, it's very alarming for me as an older singer who has been taught, um, you have to, you have your craft. Learning to do this takes time,
yeah. I'm still
and
learning.
exactly,
25 years, still learning.
brother. Every time we get on stage, we learn something about ourselves,
Yeah,
and to have this consumerism mentality with singers and performers
yeah,
is the most detrimental thing to our business possible. It just doesn't make any sense for me to think about, if you're going to cast people who have 2 or 3 years of experience and just hope that they're going to do a good job.
yeah,
That's a really bad business model.
yeah, yeah,
There's nothing wrong with having someone be a mentor, especially in a performance craft like this. Have someone cut their teeth early, that's fine. But it takes so much time to perfect this. And like you said, it's never going to get perfected, but at least we have an experience level that from every mistake that we've made,
yeah,
we've learned from it. And hopefully we add it to, our special skill set.
yeah.
But yeah, it seems like now it's very unfortunate that people have like 2 and 3 year careers, and it's like, who's next? Who's next?
Right.
And there's no development of voices. Voices don't mature, they don't season until well into your mid to late 30s
Yeah.
for most of them, generally speaking. And then people just, they'll sit back, they'll go to a show and they're like, wow, that was kind of underwhelming. And you're like, well, no wonder, they're all 22.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's another, thing that's been boiling under the surface in our industry for a long time is, especially with women and female artists, that we
definitely,
tend, when they reach a certain age, we tend to just toss them off and say, well, that they're over 50 or something. And that's,
definitely.
but it is true that it takes, you're getting into your prime when you're in your like late 30s, 40s, and 50s. You finally have figured it out, and you have that sort of thing. And, we do live in a youth obsessed culture.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to me, like, opera for a long time was a place where that was sort of, you could, going back to the suspension of disbelief, it was a place where you could perform well into your 50s and 60s and still be seen as credible. And I remember, like, it must have been like around the turn of the century and that decade that followed, there was this real emphasis on, well, then, no, it's not believable that, the Bohemians would be 40 or 50 years old. But of course, they're not thinking, what they're talking about, Met broadcasts, which zoom in on your face,
Yep.
and not the fact that you're in an opera house and the
Yep.
first person is 40 feet away from you. So
Yep.
if you move like a young person, they really can't tell how old you are. So it doesn't really matter on the stage.
Yep.
On film, it matters, but we're not a film medium. We're doing some of that now, but we're not a film medium. We're a stage
Exactly.
medium. And we're
Exactly.
in big houses.
Exactly. And it's a decision that, I don't think it's even necessarily a controversial one.
Yeah.
It's either, you're either going to have, you're either going to celebrate voices, which can only be appreciated in a big space.
Yeah.
Um, you're never going to get the nuance, the color, the size of a person's voice on a video.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. You're not going to have that visceral electric, animalistic appreciation of someone's sound and voice on a video. It's just never going to happen. It never has happened. It never will happen.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we do things. And that's the reason why we train our bodies and our technique to fill a house of 2,000, 3,000, 4,500 people to get that value of perfecting your craft, of years perfecting your craft, so that your voice will reach the last person in the last seat of that auditorium. And that does not happen overnight. That does not happen in 3 years. That
I mean, there are
takes
freaks.
so much.
There's always the odd freak that not that freak's probably the wrong word, but people who are just super
Absolutely.
gifted and they just come out with that thing, just popped out, boom, the voice is just there, and they're working at the Met at 22, and they have a whole, and that's great, but that's by no means the
The norm.
standard. That's the anomaly.
Exactly. That's the anomaly.
So if you cater a
And
business to those kind of rocket ship trajectories, well, they're like, maybe less than 1% of this entire community. And
yep,
building a business model based on, the outlier is like you turn it into a lottery, and it's not really a
exactly.
lottery in a business.
And not only do you turn it into lottery, you turn it into a detrimental situation. If you push that person, that freak of nature, we'll call them,
Mhm.
at 22, who has this amazing voice, and then you don't let them settle into that voice. You don't let them find that voice more. I mean, you and I both know I could list 10 names right now of those types of people who they're not singing anymore.
Yeah.
And so we've been robbed of these amazing voices and talents because of these power players who they go crazy, they go and super insistent, and yeah,
We're
it's
looking at those
unfortunate.
looking at those dollar signs at 10%. You know.
And it's like, yes, 100% they're looking at those dollar signs, but they're looking at that satisfaction or gratification for themselves.
Yeah.
They don't care about that singer. They're thinking there'll be another singer come along, you know, whenever, and I'll
You
just
know,
latch on to them.
what's good about like these kinds of realizations that we have sort of throughout our careers and our lives, you know, it's you can't come by those all the time, without help from people, from like older singers, some mentors and influences that sort of help us navigate. Because man, when you walk into this business in your late 20s, early 30s, you don't know anything. I'm speaking about myself, of course. Didn't
You
know
you can speak for
shit.
me too,
John,
because
oh. I just had no idea what the expectation was and what the levers were, and I sort of had that was sort of idealistic, like about believing that this was a meritocracy. If you're good enough,
yeah,
it'll go, and that's learned the hard way that way. But it's through the help of a lot of people that came before me, mentors and voice teachers and coaches and other colleagues and singers and things that have given me advice and helped me sort of see these things in a different perspective and from their lifelong careers. Are there people that you've encountered in your career and your journey that have helped you sort of keep walking down the right path to make sure that you have a career that's not 5 or 6 years but 30 years?
yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest one, I met Callan Asperian when I was just starting to sing, and she took me under her wing, and she mostly told me, she said, these are the things that I did wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, we can have this discussion as well, along with the whole awareness. She chose to have a child, kind of at the peak of her career,
Yeah.
and that was the end of her career, to have a child. And it was this. She's still to this day. Um, she's not sorry that she did it, but it definitely weighs on her, because those power players who were like, if you choose to have a child, then you're not committing yourself 100% to this business, which is the biggest load of crap. Like, how could you deny someone the privilege
What?
of being a mother?
I can't understand that because I'm like even with the pandemic, right? Like my motivations changed.
Yep,
What I will what for me to leave my to leave my wife and my two dogs and my nephews, my brother and sister in law down who live a mile from me.
yep,
We were able to have build like this sort of normal life for a year and a half, where we saw family more than we did. We spent time. It wasn't most of our lives. We like if we want to see family, mom and dad, or aunts and uncles, or sisters and brothers. It's in between gigs. We're missing Christmas. We're missing Thanksgiving. It's
yep,
in between gigs. You're flying in or you're driving in. You're getting in like maybe 24, 48 hours, maybe 72 if you're super lucky. And you're
yep,
blasting out. You don't really have that sort of commute like that communal experience with your family.
yep,
And man, once I had that, it really turned my head around about, oh my gosh, like why would I give this up
yep,
to go sing X? And so I definitely understand that like for these people who they want your sole motivation. They want you to be able to pick up and move at a hat. They
yep,
you move at the drop of a hat. They don't want you to have any other considerations other than going and doing this job
yeah.
and picking up and going rehearsing like mad for 4 or 5 days and jump in or whatever.
And how insulting is it for someone to insinuate that you don't care enough about the business to not have a child
Yeah,
or want to have a semblance of normalcy in this insane, crazy business?
yeah,
I mean, how ridiculously horrible is that for someone to even attempt to say that you're not as committed as the single soprano who chooses not, like, it's ridiculous.
yeah.
And to that point, for people of color who, when you show up to the first day at the gig and you look around the room and you're like, okay, I'm the only
It's just me.
I'm the only minority here, which has happened more times than not. But I'll tell a very brief story about working at this company, and I was covering very early in my career, very covering this at this company, and there were four Korean singers, myself included, on cover cast. And the assistant director couldn't show up that day, so the main director showed up, and he's like, "Okay, we're kind of blocking whatever." And this is like 20 years ago, whatever. And he kind of stopped and he looked around. He's like, he made this joke. He said, "Okay, all the Asians go stand at the back of the room. I'll stand in the middle of you. We'll take a picture, and I'll say I had a huge career in Asia."
Fuck me.
And we all just kind of looked at each other like, and he thought that was like the funniest thing ever.
Yeah,
And we all the rest of the singers just kind of looked at each other, knowing that we could never say anything about that.
yeah.
But today, the amazing thing is, hopefully that would never happen, A, but B, we have the courage now to say, dude, that, at least to each other, like, that was really messed up.
Yeah.
Like, let's go have a drink. Let's, hash it out.
I do feel like that for people of a certain generation who aren't really, tied into the zeitgeist and don't really get it,
Yeah.
they do feel like, they would never say the N word. They would never make an inappropriate joke about black people on stage. But all of a sudden, when it comes to the Asian experience, it seems like, oh, it's fine. They're laughing, I'm laughing, everybody's laughing.
Yep.
So no, it's no big deal. Everybody's on, and that's like, you understand it's the same. It comes from the same place of like white supremacy.
Yep.
The fact that that joke even has a kernel of genesis in your mind, and not only are you not aware enough to stop that joke in its place before it comes out of your mouth, because I can at least understand that given the culture we're in, and like given like watching television in the fucking 90s. Jesus Christ. I mean, it's
Yeah.
insane. Like, okay, I can forgive you for the joke occurring, but for the fact that you don't have a governor that says, it should stop here and not come out here is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too because it's I think Renee Fleming said in her biography, when either conductor or stage director or someone in power will treat you poorly, it has nothing really to do with you.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with them, their insecurities, their inability to deal with those insecurities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is you still have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You still have to process that. And you're absolutely right. The the freedom that those people think that they have to say those things because there hasn't been, like, could we say that that director or whoever wants to say anything, if there were like the superstars of opera, if they were all people of diversity, do you really think that that person would think that that would be okay, that joke would be okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Because it's a
Absolutely
power
not.
dynamic. They have the power. They have a certain place in the hierarchy, and it's above you and me.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And there's a certain comfort there, And I like early on in my career, my voice teacher now, Ron Rains. The first time I met him was years before that, and I had done something. He came up to me and said, "That was a good job, son. It was really good." And I was like, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Rains." Blah blah blah. And he's like, "But don't get comfortable, because comfort's for other people.
Wow.
It's not for us."
Wow.
And then when he said that to me, I thought, yeah, like it's gonna be what I took that to mean is it's gonna be uncomfortable. What I didn't realize, what I think he meant to imply, was that the discomfort is what you learn from. You learn the discomfort makes you necessarily have to learn something new to get out of that discomfort and get to a
Right.
place of, you know, and it's funny like that director or that person that's in the hierarchy. And it happens especially when like you move out of our part of the creative side, you move to the administration side, the board side. These people aren't at all tuned in sometimes to the kind of sensitivity that you must have when dealing with artists.
Yep.
And so you get to this point where that discomfort that they experience, if they experience more often, they may learn a
Yep.
lesson.
Yep.
And I don't mean teach them a lesson I don't mean punishment, but I mean
Yep.
that discomfort of having the bravery as an artist to be like, hey, that's not okay.
Yep.
And it didn't have to be something you escalate to HR, but like I find myself even as a white person that when I hear things that are borderline, uh, where I used to just write that, I would say, well, that's that. He's one of those people. I'm gonna write them off,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be the extent of it. I wouldn't really confront people about it because I'm like, I don't want to go through all that stuff, and it's uncomfortable. But now I don't do that. I'm like, hey, you hear what you just said? You know how that's inappropriate? Let's not
Yeah.
let's not do that. You know?
Yeah. It's actually the kind of catch term now, white privilege, is something that when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, no, no, I get it. I get it. There's definitely things that even as an Asian American, I experience, and but I know that for the Black community, not even Black singers, but um, any minority really, but specifically Black singers, because
Yeah.
there's such a huge systemic oppressive um, process going on in America. But it's to really look at how privileged white society has had it in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes people uncomfortable. I get it. It makes me uncomfortable thinking that as an Asian American, I've had it better than uh, my black friends. I'm like, that's kind of traumatizing. But to your point, like, let's learn from it. Let's be uncomfortable
Yeah.
and let's progress. Like, let's move forward. Let's be better.
Yeah. What would you like to see? Like, what I mean, what would you consider? Uh, I mean, what would be the kind of substantive change? What would it be? What would that look like in our industry to be more representative? Like, what like, and it's. I mean, I'm not trying to put the entire problem like, hey, why don't you solve this for us? But how, I mean, what would make you feel if you saw certain changes happening? What would like if you saw this happen and that happen, this you'd be like, okay, we're making progress. What would progress look like to you?
I think it's actually starting to happen, um, especially after Black Opera Alliance. They came on the scene. They're really, really proactive. They said, "Look, guys, here's what we can do to be better, a better society, a better art form,"
Yeah,
and it's already starting to happen. I mean, it's when I look at casting now, it's so much more diverse. It could be better. It could always be a little better. To me, the perfect situation would be for whatever cast of whatever show, why couldn't it be every single person have a representation on that stage?
yeah,
I don't see why that would be difficult. Um, and more so to the point, I don't care what the person looked like. I don't care if he's fat. I don't care if they're skinny. I don't care if they're ugly. I don't care if they're pretty. I want to know they are an amazing singer. They have an amazing voice. They're an amazing artist. They have something to say. That to me is what would be the ideal, perfect situation. And I think it's doable.
and we do
I
see scattered examples of that.
totally.
And when you see it, and that's the thing for me is like when I see it, I can't imagine a scenario. Although I mean, there's always going to be stupid ass fucking racists out there. It's just, I mean, it's going
Yeah,
to happen.
yeah,
There's going to be people that are like, but so and so is supposed to be white. I mean, that happened to my
yeah,
own fucking family before. It's embarrassing as shit.
yeah.
And the conversation is just like, well, you're just stupid, so I can't really.
All right.
But when it does happen, like when as an audience member, I feel super like thrilled about that. I'm like, that's
Absolutely.
fucking great. They're doing it, you know.
Absolutely.
And I think that like, in as much as we condemn, companies that don't make an effort to sort of rectify these injustices and this lack of representation, I think it's as important as when we see it done right and we see a company making the right choice. We should lift them up and say, "Hey,
Definitely.
look at this! Look at this cast looks like America, or this cast looks like the world."
Definitely.
And if it looked like the world, frankly, it would be minority white because we're the minority in the world. So we're the
Right.
global minority. So if you want to look like the globe, that's I mean we all say we're part of a global community and we're progressive. Well, if you want to be really progressive, that means if you want to represent the world, that means that you have to flip your script.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
saying this as a white dude. I know that's not good from a business for me. But I think that when you expand the tent, I know that communities can be defined by race, they can be defined by economic status and whatnot. And for me, like I'm a like I came up in a blue collar family, even though my dad had he had a salary, but it's very blue. He worked for an oil company and we were firmly middle class to lower middle class. And I came up. Everybody I grew up with was I had friends that were just dirt poor, man, like living in trailers and stuff. I lived in a trailer for 14 years of my life when I was young. And when I go on stage, and that's why I dress like a hillbilly on acid, because I'm really bringing the representation of my particular culture to the stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes when I come off stage and I throw on my boots and my cowboy hat and everything, and I see people that have come to see me from my community, like when I perform at Houston, they have some skin in the game on the
Yeah.
stage, and they know that's old Mike Mays from Cut and Shoot, Texas, up there.
Yeah.
He's just like me. We went to elementary school together. We went to high school together, And just like when I go to a soccer game, I don't give a shit about soccer. Don't know anything. Don't even like it. But if my nephews are playing, I get into it because I
Right.
see part of me up there with them. And
Right.
so when we diversify what we present to the world, we engage people in a different way and we give them a reason to show up and come to the opera house, especially at a time when the competition for those dollars is so great.
Absolutely. And heaven forbid that one of your friends actually say, "Wow, I kind of like opera. Maybe I'll go to another one."
Yeah. I mean, and I have that story has happened countless times,
I
you
mean,
know?
heaven forbid. And isn't that our mission?
Yeah.
Isn't that every single performer's mission in opera, to nourish the art form, to grow the art form, to cultivate the art form?
Yeah.
It's not about celebration of rich and powerful. That's not what the art form is created for.
One of the things that I was speaking with a colleague yesterday about, and they were actually, it was a group of young artists. And we're all, especially when we're young, we're idealistic, and that I think the one of the hardest battles is maintaining those ideals throughout your life, and
Yeah.
not just giving up on them.
Yeah.
And one of them was talking about that. You're like, I got into art. I'm an artist. I'm a creative person. This happens to be my medium, but I want my art to mean something, and I struggle with the fact that when I'm performing on stage, primarily my audience is made up of people that are of a status that I don't recognize. It's not part of my story.
Yeah.
And the people that I'm really serving, who are the boards and things, they're all in the 1%. And they're the ones that are writing those million, 10 million, $20 million checks. And so what am I doing? Am I just here to entertain these rich people and be their pet or something?
All right.
And I struggled with this same thing my whole career. And what I told her was, well, you can look at it this way. When you are an effective storyteller and you're telling a story that activates empathy in people, and often our stories are about the oppressed people. They're all about the poor, the oppressed. And especially with new opera, we're really digging into those stories now.
Yeah.
When you tell that story effectively and when you're able to open that back door of empathy to people, you're able to go around all of the things that all the dogmatic bullshit ideology that separates us. Like when I go do a show about veterans issues, you know, it's a story of it's got the setting of being about veterans. The characters are veterans, but the story is about interpersonal relationships. And there's often elements of how we've let our veterans down as a country, and how we've done these things. So these people have this incredible, when you talk about veterans issue, they're holy folks. You cannot attack that group.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people are very loyal to their veterans.
Yeah.
But when you tell an empathetic story with a veteran at the center of it, you you see these people, their walls come down,
Yeah.
and they're able to connect with the character on stage, and that empathy grows. What I was telling her was that, hey, you have a chance to reach the people that
Absolutely.
have the reins of power in our society. You can speak directly to them. And if you tell a truly empathetic story and you're able to give them some insight, what it's like to be a part of an oppressed group, maybe when it comes time to vote, when it comes time to distribute their, whatever money they need to get rid of in order to satisfy whatever tax, you
Yeah.
know, they will think differently about how they use their power.
Definitely.
You know,
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's like what you said. There's going to be racist people in America. It's just the way it is.
yeah,
Um, Ignorance breeds ignorance, and there's just going to be some people who will never change. We
yeah,
all have to come to terms with that, no matter what we're fighting for. Um, you're 100% right. It is art's purpose to make people think, to make people feel, but mostly to make people think. And if we can just make one person look at a situation or an event or another person in a different perspective, worth it.
yeah. Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. And that's, I I'm sure you're the same way. I love it when an audience member would come up to me after a show and be like, "That was so amazing. I was so moved." And I was like, "Okay, I'm done. That's on to the next show."
Yeah. And on this, in the same vein, like when I do a, like when I would do Dead Man or Glory Denied, you would see people who are from those communities really affected sort of emotionally and like,
Yeah.
I mean, in a very dramatic way. And like we can do that with, you know, when we tell the stories of people of an oppressed, of poor white trash in the South, and you have people who came from that community and see themselves and they go, that's, I mean, I really appreciated seeing my story. I had a kid come up to me after a Dead Man Walking who had been in prison. He just gotten
Wow.
out, and he was like, he was only there as part of some sort of, uh, you know, enrichment program for the ex incarcerated.
Wow.
And I don't think I think he thought I'm just going to come to this stupid fucking opera and whatever, it's
Yeah.
do my thing and get my time. And this kid, man, he was like, I think he was like 26. He wasn't like, a lifer or anything. He'd been in prison for about 5 years.
Wow.
And he was like, he walked up, he was, I walked up to just a big group of people and he's sort of like standing on the side, sort of, I could see he was like affected
Right.
and nervous. And so I just kind of went up to him. I was like, hey man, you know, thanks for coming to the show. I really appreciate it. And this guy starts talking and he just spills. Like he starts
Wow.
crying. He's like, I didn't expect this. I came here just to do, and seeing, I felt like I saw my story up there, like being somebody who made a mistake when I was young, and then society just wanted to toss me away and forget about me. He's like, when you were inside those prison bars and you were raging and you were just like felt like you were pacing like an animal. He's like, I know that feeling, and seeing that
Wow.
story and seeing that story and seeing people around me empathize with that guy made me
Wow.
feel like I had hope to that people would understand me. And the guy's crying, and like that's it, man.
That's
So we
incredible.
know we know how powerful this art form is.
Yeah.
We know what the power is.
Yeah.
So when we can use it to tell the stories of these disenfranchised groups like Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinx community, trans community, all these communities that have been oppressed, we have the ability to really change people at an individual level. Are we going to
Yeah.
change society as opera? Probably fucking not. But we can change individuals. And I'm much, it's much more gratifying to say, to see what your work has done and what it has wrought in the life of an individual than it is to say
Definitely. But
society.
the individual makes the society.
Yeah,
It is the individual that makes society, and it is the mission and the hope that that amazing experience that he had lifts him up, encourages him in some way to be gracious and kind to someone who's in his situation.
yeah,
Um, and it's not. I don't think it's that melodramatic to say that opera can do that, music can do that, singing can do that, if we just allow it.
yeah. I think that's a great point. I think it's a great one to close on because literally we do have the power in our industry to address these inequities.
Definitely.
And we're not and the point is I think that we shouldn't address them in order to satisfy some tokenism or some sort of way. Okay, now they'll shut up.
Right.
The point is it by engaging people from diverse communities, we in turn engage those communities. And I think that's a super
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Appreciate you, brother.
Hey man, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Dude, my pleasure.
I know it's not
Anytime.
easy to talk about, but I appreciate your bravery very much.
It's needed, much needed. Thanks for the forum.
You
Thanks
got
for
it, my
the
man.
bill. Yeah, you got it. Thanks.